When I hear the word biryani, I want to eat it. You know, biryani is a very wholesome meal. You have everything inside it. You have the rice, you have the cereal, you have, whether you're a vegetarian, so you have the vegetables in it, or if you're a non-vegetarian, you have the meat in it. So it's a very wholesome meal, and you know, like if you're preparing a biryani, all you need is an accompaniment, is a salad and a curd dish, or raita as it's called. That's all you need with it. Whereas with other dishes, you have to cook so many other things to go with it. A biryani becomes a complete meal in itself.
I believe that the popularity of biryani as such is the idea of it being a one dish meal. It having rice, because we are primarily rice eating people, and the spices, the way we added the spices, whether it came from Persia, I'm sure it was very bland, or came through the Arabs, again I'm sure it was pretty bland. But we just evolved our own versions of biryani that catered to our taste buds, and it just became a dish that was extremely popular with its own versions across the country. The restaurants caught on with this because it was, as I said, very easy to put together. So that became, that caught the imagination of the people, but it is also very rooted in our culinary culture now. At least since the 10th century, from the tables of the kings and the conquerors and all of that, it just dropped down to the ordinary man's table, because it appealed to the ordinary man, because it had what the ordinary person's taste buds really craved. It had the rice, it had the spices, and it had the meat all together. You know, and that gratification and satisfaction came from having touching all the notes that you really desire.
Biryani, a dish that has captured the hearts and taste buds of millions. With its mix of rice, spices, meat, and vegetables, it is truly a dish that has something for everyone. Hi, I'm Kartika, a fellow learner who's excited by all things heritage and is forever curious to know more about the many forms in which heritage shapes our everyday lives. And of course, I tagged along with Team Inherit as they explored the multiple stories, histories, and emotions associated with this iconic dish. Every bite of biryani is an amalgamation of the dynamic forces of heritage and culture, coming together in a beautiful burst of flavors.
While there are all these debates around the biryani, there is also something very unifying about the biryani. And the way I see it, one is because it's a form that's recognizable across the country. So even if someone from Tamil Nadu goes up to, say, Lucknow, and they are presented with a biryani, or they're ordering a biryani in a restaurant, they know what they can expect. That form doesn't really change too drastically. So there is some familiarity that is gained from even visiting a foreign place that's foreign to people. Because of its form and structure, the biryani allows for sharing, and so there are many occasions and celebrations, from marriages to special occasions and rituals, where biryani is shared amongst people. It's compared to a lot of other dishes, it's easier to make in large quantities in bulk. So this means that you'd find very often that the biryani is something that's made as a celebratory meal, because it includes expensive ingredients like meat, to mark occasions, to mark celebrations, and where communities and people gather together.
And I really believe that the idea of rice and meat coming together has been around for centuries. And so when biryani comes on the scene, it also adds several other tasting tones, you can say, or it is more complex. And that complexity is something that people really love when they are eating. a biryani, whether it is in India or it's abroad. And let us face it, Indian diaspora everywhere in the world loves this biryani, because, and not just Indian. Let us look at the whole subcontinent of South Asia. Be it Pakistan or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, they have their own versions of the biryani, and there is a huge diaspora from the subcontinent which has actually contributed to popularizing it all over the world.
Beyond its flavors, biryani holds a profound significance in our social and cultural fabric. It's over a plate of biryani, after all, that love, laughter, and lives are shared, be it while watching a cricket match or a close friend getting married. And whether it's the aromatic dum biryani served at grand festivities or a simpler home cooked version shared during celebrations, each serving reflects the joy, unity, and warmth that defines these special moments. Given that it occupies such an important space in our lives today, I've always wondered about the journey that this dish has taken to reach here on our plates.
The word biryani comes from a Persian word called biryan, which means fried before cooking. And therein lies the clue to where the origins of biryani in India lie, because it is in all likelihood something that was brought in from the Middle East towards India. There are different accounts of who exactly brought it. One school of thought says Mughals, another says the Nizams of Hyderabad, another says Nawabs of Lucknow. So that there are different schools of thought.
Also, there is another theory of the Arab traders bringing with them a style of somewhat like a spiced rice with fried and cooked meat, which is kind of a pulao kind of a style. So it could be possible that already this pulao or biryani was there in Kerala, and then you have Thalassery biryani, you have the biryani chettinad, and of course Bangalorean biryani. Then Bombay biryani probably came with the Sindhis, because their Sindhi biryani is kind of different. In the 2nd century AD, in Tamil literature, we have a meat and rice dish with turmeric and spices called unsoru. So on its own, the rice and meat combination might have evolved in India, in different parts as well. But let us say the domination of biryani came in much later, it just came in with the maybe Mahmud Ghazni coming with his, and maybe it was spiced up in the Mughals, in the Mughal kitchens. That is what we see today as the North Indian biryani.
Biryani in India, as we eat it now, was developed sometime in the 18th or 19th century, because the recipe books that we see from Shah Jahan's era or even earlier does not mention the word biryani. But what cookbook from Shah Jahan's era called Nuskha-e Shah Jahani does mention is a dish called Zere Biryani. So as I mentioned earlier, the biryani means fried or roasted. Zair means under. So this is a layering technique. I translated an account of the Mughal court under Akbar Shah and Madhur Shah Zafar, that is early 19th century, called Bazme Akhir. And Bazme Akhir has very detailed, not description, but mentions of various items of food that were laid before the emperor, the imperial food, or khasa as they call it. So there we find mention of biryani. As I said, the earlier mentions were of a dish called Zere Biryani, but the word biryani does come in to play in Bazme Akhir. So somewhere along the line, this word Zere Biryani got translated into biryani.
So in the versions that have arisen as a result, there are of course two significant ones that are always compared, which is the Lucknowi biryani and the Hyderabadi biryani. Now, the Hyderabadi biryani is a little more intensely flavored, and the technique of cooking is called dum. In Hyderabadi biryani, the meat and the rice are layered, and there are two versions of doing this. There's the kachi, where the raw meat and the rice are layered and it's cooked together, and the pakki, where both are partially cooked and then finished. but the key technique that needs to be there for the Hyderabadi biryani is the dum, which means that vessel in which the biryani is being prepared needs to be covered, usually with a lid which is lined with a dough, so that there's absolutely no steam or moisture that's leaving it. So it cooks in a combination of direct heat from the bottom, but also steam from inside.
The Lucknow biryani is a mixture between a pulao and a biryani, where they cook the meat partially and then they don't layer it, but they cook the rice on, keep the rice on top of the meat and then they cook it. They add milk to it. So it has a very delicate flavor.
And in contrast to the Hyderabadi biryani, it's a little more subtle. There are still spices involved, but usually more whole spices than ground spices. And the Lucknowi biryani is more about the aroma of the biryani as you unravel it, as opposed to the more taste and flavor centric or flavor intense Hyderabadi biryani. But those are not just the only two forms of biryani. It's a pity that most people speak about or think about only these two forms of biryani in the context of the dish.
My favorite biryanis, if apart from Makhani Pulao, we will talk of my favorite biryani, it would be the Khoja biryani that is cooked in Pune and Bombay. Because there they add, it's again dum ki biryani hoti hai, jisko kachi biryani kehte hain, where they partially cook, they keep the meat which is marinated and they add some tenderizer, sometimes papita to it. The meat is not cooked. And then partially cooked rice is put on top of it and then they seal it with the dough and then they cook it. That is their version of biryani.
We do know of biryani going to Bengal, going with Wajid Ali Shah to Bengal, and where he was exiled after 1857. He went with his cooks, and then what did they amalgamate? They put aloo in it. Possibly because aloo was an exotic new vegetable that had come, or maybe because he didn't have enough of resources to have so much meat. So maybe he wanted to change that proportion of meat to rice also, and to use less meat, he probably suggested, or the cook suggested, that why don't you put in aloo, which is a new vegetable, and give it a different taste, and that became the Kolkata biryani.
Down south, you have a few different variations. Apart from the Hyderabadi biryani, there is in Karnataka the Bhatkali biryani, where in contrast to all the other biryanis, there's very little turmeric or red spice that I use. It's usually rich in onion and green chili, so it's a lighter colored biryani. In Kerala, my favorite biryani of all is the Mopla biryani, also known by other names like Talasiri biryani or Malabari biryani. And the difference here, one is the fact that instead of basmati as a long grain rice that's used in a lot of biryanis in the north, here it's a short grain rice variety called Jiragashala or Kaima that's used. And it is really short grain, so it's very contrastly different to the other biryanis.
When I had the Chettinad biryani, I was really impressed by the aroma of the rice, which was the Hiranga Samba rice, which is a small grain variety. It was completely coated by spices and it had its own aroma, it had its own taste. However, in the north of India, we are completely seduced by the hybrid variety, which is a long grain rice, and what we find in our pulaus and biryanis is the idea of the rice being long and curving, and the old timers say it's like plastic. It has no taste of its own. It is just tasting of the spices that we put in it, right? So when you go down south, you find that they value their heritage rices.
In Tamil Nadu, there are a few distinct styles of biryani. There's the Ambur biryani, which uses Jiraga Samba rice and or Siraga Samba rice. And there is the Dindigul biryani, where the meat is marinated with curd and lime juice, so it's like a more sour flavor profile. and these are basically some of the most common varieties of biryani. In Kerala, we have something called a kappa biryani, where it's made with tapioca and beef. Now it's actually called kappa biryani there, so it doesn't have rice. There are biryanis made with millets, for example, which also do not have rice. There are other versions which may not be addressed or called biryanis, but inevitably by technique they fit those flavor profiles. For example, in Meghalaya, they make something called jado, where the rice is again cooked with meat and turmeric, and it's spicy. It's almost like a pulao, but to me, it has all the profile and the characteristics of a biryani, typically eaten during the breakfast, originally made with blood. So, I mean, there are variations of the biryani which are not exactly called biryani, but for all intents and purposes, especially as a chef, you can classify it into as such. But what is widely accepted as biryani are the examples I gave.
I thought there was just one style of biryani, that is a meat and rice dish that we are having, and that's it. No idea that there can be so many variations even in North India. Of course, regionally there are variations, but I had no idea that there can be variations within North India also of the different styles of biryanis, and they could taste completely different. So that came as a surprise, as did the difference between pulao and biryani, which still people are a little hazy about.
Oh my god, that is true. Imagine our shock when we were told that the biryani we're eating is technically not a biryani. The definition of biryani in a culinary school is different from that in the households of Rampur or the kitchens of Ambur.
We have not really grown up on eating biryani, which was a dish that was introduced to us later, though we always called our pulao biryani. We kind of use the two terms interchangeably. It was only later when I had this culinary enlightenment that I understood the difference between the two dishes. So we grew up eating pulao, we grew up preparing pulao, and pulao is a more versatile dish, possibly a precursor of what we know as biryani.
Pulao is something that is cooked in a broth. Like for yakhni pulao, the meat broth is made. The meat can be it can be chicken or mutton or whatever. A broth is made out of that by boiling it in various spices, and those spices are tied in a potli or in a cloth bag so that the color of the rice does not get muddied by the yakhni. And yakhni is basically the soup. So then you cook the rice in the soup.
Even today, I keep checking my people about it. The reason is that the idea of biryani is frying, you see. So even when you are making pulao, you are frying the onions, you are frying the meat, and you are frying the rice before cooking it in the meat stock, the spicy meat stock. So that is why a lot of people in India would not know the distinction between pulao and biryani.
How is a biryani different from a pulao? And here again, it's very difficult to make a clear distinction. There are a lot of similarities and even the differences that people make out to be, there are exceptions to the differences as well. But typically, it is agreed that pulao is milder and lighter in flavor and aroma. A pulao is not really cooked by layering. And in a pulao, the rice becomes a central focus as opposed to a biryani where it's often the rice plus one of the support ingredients like meat or vegetables. And then the single biggest debate around biryani is a veg biryani really a biryani? Again, many schools of thought. This all boils down to etymology.
Does the word biryani denote that it can only be made with meat? It doesn't. Biryan is frying.
Nuskai Shahjahani also has a paneer biryani recipe. So you can layer anything that's been cooked and roasted with rice. When people say that there is no such thing as veg biryani, that's when I want people to understand the difference between the technique. That biryani and pulao are techniques. They are not So you can, if you're using that technique, you can use whatever you want as the roasted part of it, whether it's vegetables, whether it's paneer, fish, chicken, mutton, whatever you want. That's the most important thing.
Do I consider veg biryani biryani? Sure. If it is cooked using those particular techniques, fits into the definition, is delicious and is making the end person happy consuming it and finds joy in it, why not? Does it matter that it's called a biryani or a pulao? Not really.
So recipes are evolving. Like I say, you can't stop this evolution. Maybe someday you will have the chocolate biryani also, and people would be happily eating it.
Huh. That is quite a thought. But now that I'm getting to know more, I realize that these permutations of layered, non-layered, vegetarian and meat-based biryanis, all versions that exist and are enjoyed and appreciated, show us how culture and tradition, much like biryani itself, is evolving and updating. And neither we nor biryani can exist in a single rigid structure.
They say in India that 50 कोस पे ज़बान बदलती है, 50 कोस के ऊपर लैंग्वेज ज़बान मतलब डायलेक्ट बदलती है, और ऐसा ही बहुत सी चीज़ें बदलती हैं, including how we cook various foods and what our relationship with food is. But something that you will find pan-India is a version of biryani.
Any dish that has a changeability, a versatility would be more enduring. So if something is actually no recipe is really cast in iron, there'll be 10 ways of making dals, then khichdi is a truly Indian dish, and there are so many hundreds of ways of making different styles of khichdi. The same way with biryani.
But the biryani is something that has come from an outside influence relatively recently in history and found its way into many different regions, with each region adapting it to suit their own needs. So whether it's in terms of what's available, so in the south cooking with short grain rice varieties, or whether it's in terms of what was the economic or political situation at the time with the Calcutta biryani and the use of potatoes, you see these changes evolve and adapt within this one dish. And it's again really reflective of how food transforms over time and from place to place, which again begs the question of authenticity. Now, what is an authentic Hyderabadi biryani, or what is an authentic Lucknowi biryani?
Authenticity in itself is a very fraught concept, and as a historian, we do not say, okay, this is authentic. What is authentic and what is heritage is just open to debate. There's nothing that is authentic, because recipes are moving across timelines, they are moving across borders, and they are evolving, they are amalgamating different things. So you have the Yarkhandi biryani, Yarkhandi pulao, which actually traveled through the Silk Route, and it is cooked in Leh. So different forms and amalgamations are carrying on even as we speak. People are coming up with different versions of pulaos, biryani, as well as the other dishes. So I do not believe in the whole idea of something being called or labeled as authentic.
So for me, learning about the source of the food, how it is prepared, the stories around it, there's folklore around food. That's far more interesting than trying to figure out which version is authentic or which version is not.
Authenticity is not what we are looking at. We are looking at making this whole evolution your own, understanding this whole evolution, accepting it, and carrying on. So when I ate the Chettinad biryani, I also ate the years of evolution that have gone into spicing up that dish and including the local flavors and making it something that is different yet similar. So when we catch something that is similar familiar to our taste buds, and yet we appreciate the difference, is when that dish becomes truly our own.
The discourse on authenticity couldn't have been better expressed than this. And that is why remembering the stories associated with food is essential. Documenting biryani isn't just about preserving recipes. It's about capturing the history, traditions, and emotions tied to the dish. From ancient courts to modern kitchens, biryani reflects the socio-cultural changes of our times. By chronicling these narratives, we not only celebrate the dish, but also honor the people who have kept its legacy alive.
Like as I said, my mother didn't cook, but she would give the directions to our Khansama. So it's very important to recognize their role and to recognize their role in preserving recipes. And not only just preserving recipes, but preserving a way of life. So it's very important to understand that. And that is why, like oral history becomes very important. A lot of history recipe books nowadays are being written by women. Like I have this one book from Urdu which I use a lot called Ismati Dastarkhan. Now this was written, this was compiled in the 1940s, and Ismati Dastarkhan is a series of recipes from various households contributed by the women of those households. And that is something that I use a lot. I use a lot of recipes from that book. So that's a very important document. And that book is now out of print, so I feel very sad about it.
I hope we go back to the slow cooking thing again, because that was very important. The idea of dum pukht and the judging of the dum, how long, how much water, how much stock, all of that was a very, very important part of the whole biryani process, which is why you don't really get that old style biryani anymore. Rice has changed, the process has changed. So it is, when you look back, when I look back, yes, the complete texture of the dish is different now.
With just this one example of the biryani, you've seen how traditional food knowledge and wisdom and techniques and food heritage or cuisine heritage has so many different layers to it. There are debates, there's unifying factors, it evolves. So when you think of heritage, then it almost becomes a very complex, layered, living, breathing thing. It's not like you can, find a point in time where heritage begins, for example, and it's not where you can find a point in time when heritage ends. It carries through and through, and it takes on various shapes and forms. And this is true of the biryani, but it's also true of practically every aspect of our lives today. And it requires a lot of collective efforts to continue to study, understand, disseminate the knowledge and share, so that we are able to document it at the very least.
See, documenting food is not only just documenting a dish, it's documenting social history. You see the kind of food, the kind of celebrations, the kind of festivals and festivities. You see the way people are intermingling. You see the diversity in our country. You see how we are all unified by a simple dish called biryani.
What we have on our plate is what is our heritage. And what we are doing to that food on our plate is creating another level of heritage. So when you look at biryani, it is looking at the journey of people coming together. When you taste any dish and you've put it on your plate, you have made those people your own. So you cannot do away with that whole journey and that whole heritage that has come together on your plate. So I think the heritage of India is the beauty of amalgamation. I don't feel that such a vast diversity of cultures and subcultures have amalgamated through centuries in any other part of the world as in India. That's my personal opinion. So the Indian heritage, every part of it, every evolution of it is extremely dear to us and should be dear to us. And we should tell our younger people that, this is us. All these changes, it is us.